Hello, Aubrey. Are you excited about the holidays coming up soon?
I am so excited about the holidays. I know not everyone out there celebrates Christmas, but there may be some type of holiday you're celebrating soon. It's fun just to get into the holiday spirit.
Oh, I'm really excited. Yeah, just to maybe see family a bit more, maybe just work a little less or slow down, take some
Yes.
days off and just relax. I am super excited.
Yeah,
So
lots
this
of
is the
family time, right?
yeah, this is what we're getting into today, but we do have a really really important caveat for any of our listeners that happen to be listening today with their children. What is it, Aubrey?
Yes. So some of you have let us know that you listen with your children, which we love. That is awesome. We are going to be talking about Christmas magic and Santa Claus today. And it's a message that you might not want very young children to hear. So just a heads up, you may not want to listen to this episode with young children.
Yeah, but we have 2,000 plus other episodes. So if you're
Yes.
in that moment where you think you want to turn it off right now, go back to our other episodes. So many options for you.
Right. And then
Um,
come back and listen later without the kids because this is going to be a great
yes.
episode. We don't want you to miss it. But
Yes,
we also little not appropriate for little ears.
exactly. Well, let's get into it. Let's ask the big question, Aubrey. Can I ask you?
Well, let me ask you because
Okay.
we'll both answer this. I'm gonna ask you first, Lindsay.
Yeah.
How did you find out that Santa wasn't real?
Yeah, I just remember having a conversation with my mom. I think I would maybe I was a little on the older side. I think usually first children tend to learn later, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I think I was about like 9. I was, and I and I sort of, started to question. I started to ask the more pointed
Yeah.
questions. Well, how does this work? How exactly does he get down the chimney? And how
Mhm.
can he possibly go to all the houses in the whole world? And my mom started saying things like, "Well, what do you think?" Like not in a rude way, kind of more in she didn't want to say
Like,
it, you
yeah,
know,
let's talk about
but
it.
she
Let's
wanted
think
to kind
about
of
it.
facilitate a space for me, but not tell me the true answer. What about
Totally.
you, Aubrey? Were you like
Sounds like
3?
your mom handled it really well. No, I have never had a conversation with my parents about Santa not being real. I was high school, college, Santa was still bringing presents, and, it's like at some point I just knew, but we just never had a conversation. I never asked. It was like, "Don't ask, don't
Oh,
tell."
don't ask.
If you believe, he will keep bringing you presents. So
That's
we just never
so
talked about it.
funny. Wow, that is so interesting. We all have our own unique experience. I mean, I know for sure if you're a middle child or a third child, you probably learn earlier usually, but in some cases, things aren't talked about in households too,
Yeah.
right?
And it depends on the child. So I'm going to share
Yeah.
sort of what's happened with some of my kids, but first we want to share this amazing question we got that inspired this episode. Lindsay, can you read this question for us?
All right, here we go. Absolutely. And just one more caveat if any of our listeners have joined in recently before we did our last caveat, if you're listening with a young child, maybe listen to another episode today. All right. And then come back on your own to listen in. Here we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Mai from Japan. I enjoy listening to your podcast and the stories of each host every day. I have a question. I'm very curious how children in the US who believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy eventually end up. I have a 9-year-old daughter who recently asked, does Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy really exist? It is so adorable to watch my daughter believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, but I honestly don't know how to answer the question. This is not a question about English, but if you could introduce my question on your podcast, could you tell me your experience or any heartwarming story if you have one? Oh, that is
It's
beautiful.
an amazing question, and it is about English, right? Because a lot of
Yes.
you are teaching your children to be bilingual, or you have immigrated somewhere where your kids are, starting to create their own traditions. You're creating your own family traditions in an English-speaking country, and you do need to
Yes.
know, how
Yes.
do I say this? What are the phrases I would use? What are my kids learning at school? It's interesting. There's a lot to think about.
Oh, 100%. And thank you to Mai for asking this question. It's a great question. Before we do get into it, I want to request for our listeners to hit that follow button because we're looking at 2025 and we have options. I know for me, the podcasts that I actually follow are the ones that drop into my queue, and those are the ones I end up listening to, right? I don't go searching for others very often.
Same.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the way to make English a habit and to learn the right values, what we think are the right values around English, which is connection, not perfection. Human connection. Okay. Hit
Yes,
follow.
absolutely. So hit that follow button, everyone. We love it.
All right.
Okay, so I have been asked this question because I have 4 children,
Yeah.
and I think I have a good answer, so I'm excited to share. I want you guys to stay to the end to hear a couple of different answers because kids are very different, and each parent knows this. If you have more than one child, it's going to work differently. They're going to need maybe a little different answer. But at
Yeah.
first, I think it's interesting to think about this isn't just about Christmas, right? There are a lot
Mhm.
of things where parents tell little white lies to their children. We
Sure.
have Elf on the Shelf, which is supposedly a real elf that goes to Santa and then it moves every night. And
Yeah.
this is some like kind of a little white lie. And then the Tooth Fairy, I pointed out as well. A lot of parents hide, the children hide their teeth under the pillow and
Right.
then it disappears and there's money and the Tooth Fairy has replaced the tooth. So there are
Right.
kind of a lot of lies that we tell children, right, Lindsay?
Yeah, Elf on the Shelf, I think must be new because my niece, oh sorry, my niece does that, or she did. I think she's past that age by now. But this must be new because we definitely didn't have
It's
Elf
newer.
Elf
It
on
comes
the
with a
Shelf.
book that came out
Yeah.
maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
It's been a little while, but
A little
newer
while.
than when we were little, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's a little stuffed animal elf that you're supposed to bring out or shows up on December 1st, and
Yes.
then, keeps an eye on the kids to make sure they're good, which is kind of
Ah,
creepy, and
creepy.
then moves every morning is in a different spot. But our kids have loved looking for the elf every morning to find out where she has ended up, and it is
Yeah.
really hard to remember to move her. Ours is a little
They
girl named Juliet.
it's hilarious. They love it, but that's the first thing I thought too, creepy.
Kind of creepy, and
Creepy.
one more job for parents to have to do. I have to set an alarm in my phone for both the Tooth Fairy and the
Oh,
Elf on the Shelf
no.
to
Oh,
remember these
wow.
things.
Look at this. Yes. Oh, wow. I love it. So, what do we want our listener, Mai, and the rest of our listeners to know then? To go ahead and answer
Yeah.
this question?
So
Yeah.
her actual question was children who are told these things and who believe these things, like parents telling them, how do these kids end up? So I think the question is kind of like, does this affect a person to have their parents lie to them? And so I researched that a little bit. We're going to talk about this a little bit. What factors should you consider when you are telling these little white lies? Like, what are the possible consequences?
Yeah. It makes me think of what is it, Miracle on 34th Street, where do you remember that movie where the girl was always told that he didn't exist?
Yes.
And that was just the parents' parenting style. And then some magical things happened in the movie, right? Do you remember that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
vaguely, but yeah, same kind of
Yeah.
thing, and almost every Christmas movie does this really well, where it's like, if people believe, then Christmas magic exists, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting, at least in the US, most parents do promote the myth of Santa Claus, right?
Yeah.
Most children
Mhm.
accept it as real. You found out at about 9. My twins are 10 and still believe in Santa Claus, but
Oh,
they are
okay.
right there where you were. They're starting to ask
Yes.
questions. They're starting to hear other kids at school talk about it not being true.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Some families never openly talk about whether Santa is real or not, like mine didn't. And
Right.
some families tell their children quite early. So then it becomes tricky because the kids at school, some of them are like, mocking other students for believing.
That's too bad. And I think especially if, like I said earlier, if you're an oldest child, you probably will
Right.
believe longer because they wanna keep it going for your brother or sister because generally, I think
Right. It's
siblings would tell each other, and
magical.
then if
It's
you're the
fun.
younger one, it gets ruined pretty young, right?
Totally.
Yeah. No, we don't want that.
Yes. So we're
Yeah.
going to
Oh,
quickly go into a few of the things. I researched a little bit online. Just the sort of the things to consider when you're deciding, should I tell my children this is not true? Like when can I be
yeah.
on how, what age? So first is to consider the developmental stage.
Mhm.
And what I found was basically children are able to distinguish fact from fiction in very early childhood. And
Mhm.
but that this is going to be a very personal thing for each child. If your child has a reason to have trust issues, if they are questioning whether it's real or not, if they're saying, just tell me, kids at school are telling me, like, then you're going to want to follow your own instincts, but it might be time to just be honest, like your parents were, Lindsay, and
Yeah.
maybe like your mom did, instead of outright saying, okay, Santa's not real, say,
She
what do
wanted
you
me to
think? Like,
come to the
come to
conclusion.
the
Yeah.
conclusion yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my mom actually was a child psychologist, so she was a child
She knew her
developmental
stuff.
psychologist, so maybe that's where that came from, so give her a little credit for sure.
Yeah, I can see that. And she probably knew that. Just number 2 here is
Yeah.
you want to think about how it could affect a relationship. So for
Mhm.
me, and allowing my children to still believe Santa exists, there is no effect to the relationship, right? It's not something where it's creating this potential loss of trust, right? We
Mhm.
are building trust together, and it will be, once my kids find out, it will be something that they'll see it as like, oh, mom and dad did this in order to make Christmas magical and
Oh,
fun,
right.
rather than
Right.
like they were trying to deceive us.
Of course. No, that is so important for them to come away with the right message, right?
Right. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yes. Yeah, and
And
then the
then
impact
yeah.
of the child. What do we need to know here?
Yeah, so this is where there are a lot of different opinions, both among child psychologists, among parents. Some will definitely
Mhm.
say that like any lying encourages children to be dishonest and think dishonesty is acceptable.
Mhm.
Others will say you can help them see the magic of Christmas as different, as like a way
Yeah.
to be creative and, just to believe in the impossible, right? And that's a net positive,
Yeah, because later in life, some aspects in life do feel magical. Aspects
right?
of reality can feel very magical in life. So maybe this is just warming them up to the magic that does exist in life. And so if we look for it, you know?
Exactly, right? If you believe that nothing difficult is possible, then your whole life, maybe you won't try things at work or in life that could have led to, great results.
Right. Or even just, looking at just a sunset as magical or
Totally.
childbirth. Like the fact that children are born every day is actually magical, right? There are some true
Magic
miracles
in
that
life, yeah.
happen. It's not literally magical, but it feels like a miracle.
Feels that way.
You
And it
know?
feels, you'll get more joy sort of if you allow it to feel sort of magical, those types of
Right.
things.
So it's maybe we're trying to foster a sense of awe, right? Awe, how to
Yes.
inspire awe in children and how to look for it, which is really a foundation of a happy life, I think, you know?
Absolutely. And this leads to number 4, which is when it's all about creating traditions. If you do build traditions around Elf on the Shelf or Santa Claus or whatever myths you might have in your culture, maybe there are
Mhm.
little white lies that you tell children, children are told in your culture. If it is about creating memories and family traditions, then that probably will be a net positive. And one
Yes.
day, once your kids know the truth behind all these myths, because there are tall tales and myths, like think of the Vikings or, a lot of
Mhm.
things around all of these traditions that not everything's 100% true.
Yeah.
If in the end, the goal is to create tradition, then it should
Mm.
be positive.
Yeah, maybe and we're doing a lot of other things tradition-wise other than just stuff around Santa Claus, right? Going to get
Right.
the tree. If
Right.
you do celebrate Christmas, if it's another tradition that you celebrate, there could be other rituals, right? But we can
Exactly.
build this in 100%. Okay, Aubrey. So, do you have a specific answer here for Mai? Do you want to
Yeah,
directly
I
answer her
wanted to
question?
share so I kind of understand how you feel, Matt. It's like, I don't know how to answer this question. I'm not sure what the right answer is. And for each child, it's going to be different. I think you'll want to kind of consider everything we've talked about today. But I found when my kids ask, I've said, Santa Claus is part of the magic of Christmas, and Christmas magic can only exist if you believe in it.
Mhm.
And so this fits well with what kids hear in a lot of Christmas movies. It also works
Mhm.
for the tooth fairy to say, the tooth fairy only has magic if you believe in her. And
Yeah.
then you're not actually lying. And the
Mm.
children, as they get
Yeah, that's
older,
true.
like my twins now, it's like I tell them that, and you can kind of see something click where they're like, I am choosing to
You're like,
believe because Christmas is more fun if I
yeah,
believe and it's magical. Right. So I'm
that's
not
cool.
saying, yes, it exists. No, it doesn't exist. I'm like, it's only magical if you believe.
Oh, smart. It's a smart answer, right? I like it. I like it. Yeah.
And this recently happened too with my son who he has a wiggly tooth and he said, I know the tooth fairy isn't real. A kid at school told me that. And same thing. I said, well, it only, the tooth fairy won't bring you teeth if you don't believe in her or won't bring you money if you don't believe in
Mhm.
her, right? And then he's like,
Yeah.
just kidding, I believe. So if you want that magic to continue, you can, but it needs to sort of be like understood by both of you. That's like, this is magic that we all choose to believe or say we believe in order to keep some of the fun in Christmas, right?
Oh, that's so fun. I'm curious for our listeners. What we have the Tooth Fairy. I guess the Easter Bunny sort of was a thing at some point.
Still,
Is kind of a
absolutely, it
thing,
still is for
right?
us.
Elf on
Yeah,
the Shelf,
brings
and then
baskets.
Santa. But what do people have in other cultures too? I'm just curious. There must be
Yeah.
lots of other things that we could learn about. Guys, leave a comment, on this episode on YouTube or on Spotify, and let us know what traditions you have. Super
Yes,
interesting.
I wanna know about all of those traditions. We're going to have to do something in one of our live speaking events to find out.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
of, I don't know if you ever saw Darby O'Gill and the Little People. It was about, like,
Mm-mm.
leprechauns and banshees and some in
Okay.
Ireland, some of their myths and
Ah.
traditions, and I would love to know in every culture, yeah, what are these
Yeah.
myths and what are some of the little white lies that you tell kids to keep things magical?
Yeah, such a wonderful question from our listener. Is there another episode where we could continue on with the holiday magic here, Aubrey?
Yes, you guys don't miss episode 1907 right here on the All Ears English podcast was 3 ways the holiday spirit can create connection in English. So go check that one out as we enter the holidays. Whether you celebrate Christmas or not, whatever holiday you celebrate, you can connect in English about these celebrations.
Yeah, and I think a takeaway thought for our listeners who maybe aren't parents and don't think about this dynamic is what is your relationship in the world to awe, right?
Mm.
Do you have that sense of awe? Do you take a moment in your daily life to watch the sun? Like this morning when I was just getting out of bed, the sky was totally pink and I looked at it for a minute. I was like, wow, that is
It's
awesome,
magical.
right? It's such a daily thing, a normal thing, but there's magic in everyday life. And I feel like we can really, truly be present and happier if we pay attention to those things. So ask yourself that question. How many times a day are you kind of just watching things in awe, just watching the world unfold in that way, right?
I love that as a
Yeah.
takeaway. Yes, that is so
Mhm.
true for all of us. If we're not noticing and experiencing awe, we're missing some very magical moments. So yeah, notice
All
those
right.
things.
All right, great stuff. Thanks for bringing this question to my, and thanks for answering it, Aubrey. It's a good one. Really
Yes,
important. All
awesome.
right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.